there's a significant second allegation that's coming, and they'll be going through the same process of assessing whether there are reasonable grounds to suspect a criminal offence in our jurisdiction that British policing should investigate, or whether they should be assisting an investigation in another jurisdiction through that process I described earlier. Again, impossible to comment on what's been revealed so far, but yes, they'll definitely have to scope whether or not a criminal investigation is warranted.
Labour's Health Secretary Wes Streeting spoke to us an hour ago of how he feels now about Peter Mandelson after the revelations that he leaked documents to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson was the Health Secretary's friend and even a political mentor to him. And you can hear, I think, in the tone of voice, how Streeting feels about it.
Peter Mandelson has badly betrayed two prime ministers. He's betrayed our country and its national interest by passing highly sensitive, in some cases market-sensitive information to outsiders. He's betrayed Epstein's victims by being part of a culture that doesn't take the voices of victims seriously. But I cannot state strongly enough how bitterly that betrayal feels for those of us in the Labour Party who feel very personally let down.
Well, that was Wes Streeting. Amid the anger, he told us that Peter Mandelson should return his severance payment. If he received one, the government has still not formally confirmed that he did or didn't, and there was precedent for him losing his ministerial pension. In a moment, we'll look at how a police investigation into Peter Mandelson could unfold. But first, to Times Radio's political editor, Anna Mihailova. Good morning, Anna.
Good morning, Kate.
I mean, Wes Streeting, he sounded cross, but I think, you know, it's fair to say it's a very difficult morning for any government minister going out on the round. It is significant, though, that the severance payment should be returned, says Wes Streeting, if it was received, and also about the ministerial pension.
It is. I mean, as you say, Wes Streeting sounds affected by it. He sounds genuine. He is a very good communicator. He also separately says that their jaws hit the floor. But I think someone looking at that critically would say, would question why their jaws hit the floor to the extent that he's saying, because there were a lot of things they knew about Peter Mandelson. They knew he had a relationship with a convicted paedophile. They also knew that he had scandals previously related to money. They also knew that Donald Trump had pledged to release the Epstein files in his election campaign. So the big question returns to, why was he appointed Britain's ambassador? Because, you know, it does sound very powerful to say that he betrayed two prime ministers, but let's not forget that had the decision not been made in 2014 to bring him back into very active public life, we would be sitting here talking about a major political scandal about how a man betrayed one prime minister, not two.
And what will the government seek to do to head this off today? Because the Conservatives are posing this humble address. This is to try and get the release of all of the documents around the vetting, but much broader than that, conversations between Morgan McSweeney, for example, and Peter Mandelson going back 6 months and covering right up until where we are now. There's a lot of information being asked for. What's the government going to do? Is it prepared to release documents today?
So the government has tabled an amendment, or will be tabling an amendment to this humble address, which effectively I think we can see as an admission that they are planning to release the documents. And the amendment will have a caveat that the documents won't relate to anything to do with national security, which is not controversial because it's something that has been used in humble addresses before. However, they also want to include a caveat for what is slightly loosely termed international relations, so anything that will harm international relations. Now, considering Peter Mandelson was the ambassador to the United States very recently, you could see that being used as an attempt to try and not release certain information that the Conservatives are pushing for. And I think you can expect a bit of a row coming today about that part of the amendment. But effectively, the fact that the government is using this amendment and not whipping its MPs to vote down the Conservative motion to release a lot of documents, which, as you say, I mean, they include WhatsApps between Morgan McSweeney and Peter Mandelson. They're even trying to broaden it out beyond Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, or they want documents relating to Peter Mandelson's China links and Russia links, for example. So the fact that the government isn't telling its MPs, ignore this, vote it down, shows that they probably think they wouldn't win that vote, which is pretty shocking if you think about it in the long run.
Yeah, and Wes Streeting indicated to us in our interview earlier that the documents around vetting will be published. So we'll try and find out when that will happen and if it will happen today. Anna Mihailova, our political editor, thank you very much.
The worry must be international relations can conceal a multitude of sins, can't it? We'll see how that plays out. Neil Basu is former Assistant Commissioner, MPS, co-host of the Crime Agents podcast and author of Turmoil, 30 Years of Policing, Politics and Prejudice, and can join us now. Neil, morning to you.
Good morning, Stig.
This is going to be a very high-profile investigation into Mandelson. It feels a very significant one. How do you think it will proceed?
Well, it's a pretty grubby and tawdry affair, and I sort of agree with your point that it's the biggest political scandal of a generation. I mean, you can go back to Profumo. So police will be acting under kind of the international spotlight. That never helps. I try and take the emotion out of it. If this wasn't Epstein, would the actions have been any different if Mandelson was revealing confidential information to the CEO of any high street bank? And the answer to that in criminal terms would be potentially yes. And the Metropolitan Police were right. I was speaking to your producer 2 hours before they made the announcement to say there was obviously reasonable grounds to suspect a crime here, which means, their scoping exercise to decide whether to investigate was the correct thing to do. But they very quickly came to that decision. And how could they not, reading those emails?
I think
misconduct in public office is a very, very difficult offence. It's a very rare charge. It's a very high bar. It's actually quite simple in terms of, sounds simple to prove. It just isn't. And I can go through those points to prove if you want.
Yeah, explain that, because I think that's really interesting, because I've read it, I think, and looking at the material, I could see how the things connected. But just explain what bar they need to reach.
Well, there's four basic points to prove. The first is, was he in a public role, a public officer acting in a public manner, i.e. on behalf of the UK public, on behalf of us? The answer to that is clearly yes. He was a business secretary and the deputy PM. The second is, did he willfully neglect his duty or misconduct himself? And that has to be deliberate. He's already said he believed he didn't act criminally, but the third point to prove then is it has to be so serious it constitutes a major abuse of public trust, and that has to be very significant. This can't just be poor judgment or an error. It has to be something that is so serious it destroys public trust. And we've certainly seen a lot of reportage and a lot of politician comments about that, but actually it's not as simple as just being horrified by what he's done. And the fourth is no reasonable excuse or justification for his conduct. So, devil's advocate would say, well, was he advancing British interest? He was a business secretary. He was speaking to, a key financial individual who, with hindsight, we all know was a monster. Now, back then, did people know he was a monster? Or did they think he was actually somebody who would help influence a government's interests, your business interests, your charitable interests? Who knows? These are all points for the prosecution to prove. Lord Mandelson doesn't have to prove any of this. He could just say nothing. But the reason the police have reopened the investigation is you can't try and prove any of these points unless you actually investigate further, and that means interviewing Lord Mandelson.
Also, will they get access to all the right materials? Because that's an interesting question. This one of the problems why perhaps the Cabinet Secretary didn't investigate properly back in September was he didn't get access to private emails. There's what's being held by the American Justice Department as well. How straightforward will it be to get what's on people's phones, what's in emails, what's all over the place?
Well, applications for evidence held by the Americans. We have a very close working relationship, certainly with the FBI and with many states in America. There are things called mutual legal assistance treaties. The Crown Prosecution Service will help the police draft their business case to get disclosure of that material. And for any material that's held here in the UK, they'll get a warrant from a magistrate or a judge.
Some people are saying, you might not want to comment on this, Neil, I'll understand if you don't, but Mandelson is one thing. I think you're so right to draw. Mandelson is not a sexual scandal. It's a scandal about misconduct in a public office. It doesn't matter who Epstein is. It's about was Mandelson misusing the materials available to him. But it is connected to a broader scandal to do with abuse of women. The Met Police are also going to look at the Andrew again at some point, aren't they? That seems to have been at least opened. The prospect of Andrew being interviewed perhaps has been opened up again.
Well, that's true. There's a significant second allegation that's coming, and they'll be going through the same process of assessing whether there are reasonable grounds to suspect a criminal offence in our jurisdiction that British policing should investigate, or whether they should be assisting an investigation in another jurisdiction through that process I described earlier. again, impossible to comment on what's been revealed so far. But yes, they'll definitely have to scope whether or not a criminal investigation is warranted.
And again, the eyes of the world will be watching.
They will.
It's an interesting time. We'll see how it proceeds. I think we've got a better sense of at least the factual basis around all of this. Neil, good to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Pleasure.
That's Neil Basu, the former Assistant Commissioner to the Police, co-host of the Crime Agents podcast.